The quiet truth before the storm. It all started on a quiet evening in Los Angeles, but the silence of that night carried a weight that felt almost unnatural, as if the universe was holding its breath without warning. Keanu Reeves sat alone in the corner of a dim, warm room inside a private studio, looking at a single envelope he had kept hidden for so long that even he no longer remembered the moment he first wrote what was inside it. The world knew him as calm, humble, almost unreachable in the sweetness of his silence, but that night his hands trembled in a way that would have alarmed anyone who knew him. Something inside him was changing, slowly breaking open, and he knew he could not keep the truth buried any longer. Thousands of lights from the city below flickered against the studio window, and their soft glow made the whole place feel like a fragile memory trying to survive. It was in that moment that he whispered to himself that he was finally ready, even if the world was not. What he did not know was that Sandra Bullock, sitting miles away in her home, was holding the same kind of fear in her chest. She had felt a strange pressure building for days, something that pushed against her heart in ways she could not explain. She kept pacing her living room, touching the edges of the furniture, feeling her breath catching every now and then as if she was preparing for something big without knowing what it would be. She kept thinking about Keanu, about the quiet understanding they always shared, about the hidden bond that had shaped their lives, and about the secret they had protected for years without a single soul discovering it. They had survived rumors, distance, heartbreak, and the constant noise of Hollywood, but the truth they carried was not something the world could ignore once it came out. And somehow she feared that the moment Keanu made his move, everything around her would change forever. The story of their hidden marriage was something only they knew, a choice made in the middle of a moment when life felt heavier than usual. They married not in a grand church or a bright ceremony, but in a quiet space far away from cameras, fans, and expectations. It was a promise born from vulnerability, honesty, and a connection they could not describe with words. Over the years, they had lived separate lives publicly, smiling for cameras, appearing in different interviews, acting as if the world between them was simple and ordinary. But behind closed doors there were shared memories, old letters, soft whispers during difficult nights, and a deep respect for each other's pain. They never revealed the truth because they feared the chaos it would bring, not for themselves, but for the peace they had built around that sacred secret. On this particular night, Keanu felt the walls around him closing in, not out of fear but out of exhaustion. He had reached a point where hiding something so pure felt unfair, not only to himself but especially to Sandra. He knew she carried her own silent burdens, her own fears about what this revelation might cause for her career, her family, and her heart. But he also knew she was stronger than she believed, and her kindness was something the world deserved to understand in its complete form. He kept thinking about all the times she supported him in silence, all the times she showed up when the world turned away, all the times she stood by him without asking for anything in return. She had always been the kind of person who healed others with gentle words and warm presence, and he felt she deserved to be seen for who she truly was in his life. Not as a co-star, not as a friend, but as something far deeper. As he looked at the envelope again, he remembered the conversation that started everything. It was a night on a quiet beach years ago when they sat by the water without cameras or lights. The waves were slow, the sky was heavy, and Sandra had suddenly shared her fear of being forgotten by the people she loved. Keanu listened quietly, then told her something simple, that he would remember her in every lifetime. Those words became the doorway to the moment that changed everything. They chose each other without needing the world's approval, and their marriage became a sanctuary they cherished more than anything else in their busy lives. But now, with so many rumors surrounding them, with so many false stories spreading, Keanu felt that keeping the truth hidden was only causing more harm. The world painted pictures of them that were incomplete, shallow, or unfair, and he wanted to protect Sandra from ever feeling misunderstood again. But revealing the truth would not be easy. He knew Hollywood could twist anything. He knew the media would dig into every detail of their lives. He knew fans would react with shock, tears, anger, or overwhelming love. He knew that once he spoke the truth, there would be no going back. Their private world, the world they built with care, would no longer belong only to them. And even worse, he feared that Sandra might feel hurt if he revealed it at the wrong moment or without explaining it to her first. This fear weighed heavily on his chest as he picked up the envelope, feeling its edges press into his palm like a reminder of how fragile everything was. While he was preparing his thoughts, Sandra suddenly received a message from someone on her team. She felt a rush of anxiety as the phone vibrated in her hand, almost as if it carried the beginning of something unpredictable. She opened the message slowly, her heart beating faster with every second. It simply read that Keanu had scheduled an unexpected appearance at a major Hollywood press event the next morning. Sandra froze, her breath catching in her throat. She knew Keanu did not behave impulsively. He was thoughtful, careful, respectful. If he decided to speak at such an event, it meant something big was coming. She walked to the window, unable to stay still, and looked out at the quiet street below. A part of her wanted to call him, to ask him what he was planning, to know if he was about to change everything. But another part of her feared the answer, because deep down she sensed that this was the moment he would tell the world what they had been hiding. The hours passed slowly, and Sandra felt herself slipping into memories of the life they had built together. She remembered the night after they secretly exchanged vows, when they sat in a small kitchen drinking warm tea from mismatched cups, laughing like children who had just discovered a new world. She remembered how gentle Keanu was, how he held her hand like it was something priceless. She remembered how they promised to protect each other's peace, how they agreed to keep their love away from the noise of fame. But she also remembered the pain of having to stay silent in public, pretending they were only distant friends when their hearts were tied together in ways the world could never guess. The thought of losing that secrecy frightened her, even if a part of her longed to finally breathe freely. Meanwhile, Keanu stayed in the studio, rehearsing what he would say. He did not want dramatic lines, nor did he want to create unnecessary shock. He simply wanted to honor the truth and the love he felt. He practiced speaking with calmness, with honesty, with humility. Every time he said Sandra's name out loud, he felt a strange pressure in his chest, a mixture of love and fear. He wondered how she would react, whether she would cry, whether she would feel overwhelmed, or whether she would feel relief. But he also knew that whatever happened, he was prepared to stand by her through every moment. He felt ready to protect her more openly, without hiding behind silence or careful distance. But just as he was imagining the next day, something unexpected happened. Sandra's name lit up on his phone. She was calling. His heart jumped. He hesitated for a brief second before answering, knowing this conversation would shape everything. Her voice was soft, slightly shaky as she asked him if he was planning something for tomorrow. He wanted to reassure her, to explain everything, but the words caught in his throat. He could only tell her that she deserved the truth, that the world should know the depth of the respect he had for her, and that he could not hide their reality forever. Sandra fell silent on the other end. The silence stretched painfully, carrying a weight neither of them knew how to break. Eventually she whispered that she trusted him, but her voice trembled, revealing a vulnerability she rarely let anyone hear. He felt his chest tighten as he listened to her, because her fear mattered more to him than anything the world could say. After the call ended, Sandra sat down on her couch, holding her hands together as if trying to steady herself. Tears gathered in her eyes, not because she regretted their secret, but because she feared the world might judge them, twist their truth, or turn their love into a spectacle. She had always valued kindness, privacy, and sincerity, and she did not want their marriage to be swallowed by Hollywood drama. But at the same time, she felt something inside her breaking open, the same way Keanu felt earlier that night. She realized that maybe it was time to stop hiding, time to live without fear, time to accept that their story could inspire people instead of hurting them. But these thoughts did not calm her completely. She wiped her tears and whispered to herself that tomorrow would change everything, and she needed to be strong. The night grew deeper, and Keanu finally left the studio, carrying the envelope with him. He walked to his car slowly, feeling the cool air against his skin. He knew that once the sun rose, the whole world would begin moving toward the moment he had chosen to reveal. He imagined reporters rushing, fans reacting, studios calling, headlines spreading. It all felt overwhelming, but he also felt a strange sense of peace. For the first time in years, he was doing something not because it was easy or safe, but because it was right for the woman he loved. When he reached home, he placed the envelope on the table. Inside it was a copy of their marriage certificate, the one piece of evidence that no one could deny. He had no intention of showing it unless absolutely necessary, but just knowing it was there gave him courage. He looked around the room, feeling the emptiness, and whispered a quiet hope into the silence that Sandra would forgive him if the chaos became too heavy. As the city slept, Sandra found herself unable to close her eyes. She walked to her bedroom window again, hugging her arms around herself as the moonlight spilled across the floor. She could almost imagine Keanu walking toward a future that terrified and comforted her at the same time. She kept thinking about all the years they spent protecting their love, about all the ways they supported each other without the world ever knowing. But now that the truth was finally stepping out of the shadows, she wondered if her heart was prepared for the reaction it would bring. Then, as if the universe wanted to test her strength one final time, her phone buzzed again. This time it was a notification from the Hollywood press announcing that Keanu Reeves would be making a major personal statement the next morning, a statement expected to shock everyone. Sandra felt her heart drop. She realized the news was already spreading even before Keanu said a word. The storm was coming faster than she expected. She whispered, barely breathing, that tomorrow she might lose the quiet life she had built, or she might gain something far more powerful. Love in the open, love without fear, love that could finally breathe. But as she stood there, still trembling, she wondered one thing that refused to leave her mind. Would the world accept their truth? Or would it break them apart? The night ended with that question carving itself into her heart like a quiet warning. And as the sun began to rise over Los Angeles, bringing the moment closer with every passing second, neither of them realized that something even bigger was waiting for them at the press event. Something that would change not only their lives, but the way the world saw love. And just before dawn, Sandra felt a sudden, sharp fear, because she sensed that whatever Keanu was about to reveal, it might not end the way either of them imagined. The press event that shook the city. The morning of the press event arrived with an unexpected heaviness in the air. the kind of weight that makes even the calmest person feel as if something enormous is about to unfold. Thousands of people in Los Angeles woke up to the same headline announcing Keanu Reeves' sudden decision to speak publicly about something personal, something described by insiders as life-changing. Every news channel prepared special segments, every journalist rushed toward the event venue, and fans around the world filled social media with questions, theories, and nervous excitement. No one knew what he planned to say, but the tone of the announcement made it clear that the world was about to hear something that would rewrite the narrative of his entire life. Keanu stood quietly backstage, breathing slowly as he tried to steady the tremble inside him. He had always been humble, always avoided unnecessary attention, and always respected the privacy of his personal life. But this moment was different. This moment required courage beyond what he had ever shown on a screen. As he stood near the curtain, listening to the distant voices of reporters gathering outside, he felt like he was standing between two worlds. Behind him was the life he had protected for years, a life built on silence and care. Ahead of him was a storm, unpredictable and unstoppable, but necessary. He held the envelope in his hand, though he did not plan to present it unless things became uncontrollable. The paper felt heavier than it should, as if it carried not only truth but memories, fears, promises, and the quiet hope that Sandra would understand why he was doing this. He kept replaying their phone conversation from the night before, her shaking voice, her fear mixed with trust. He knew revealing their hidden marriage would shake her world, and he prayed he was making the right decision for both of them. While Keanu prepared himself, Sandra sat in the backseat of a car that was driving her toward the same event. She had not planned to attend originally, but something inside her refused to stay home. She needed to be there, not to control the situation, but to stand with him in case everything collapsed. Her heart kept racing as she stared out the window, watching the city blur by. Every building, every streetlight, every passing car reminded her that once she stepped out into the open, her life might never return to the quiet she had guarded so carefully. The closer she got to the venue, the louder the world seemed to become. Helicopters hovered above the building, cameras lined every corner, and crowds of fans filled the sidewalks. Sandra felt a wave of dizziness wash over her. The attention was overwhelming, and she feared what would happen once the truth came out. But she reminded herself of who Keanu was, of his kindness, his strength, his honesty. She kept telling herself that if he chose this moment, then there must be a reason deeper than fear or pressure. She placed her hand over her heart, feeling it pound hard, and whispered softly that she would trust him no matter what happened next. Inside the event hall, the atmosphere was thick with anticipation. Camera crews tested their equipment, journalists whispered theories in rushed voices, and everyone waited for the moment Keanu would step onto the stage. When Sandra entered the hall quietly through a side door, a few people noticed her, but no one approached her. She wore a simple outfit and tried to keep her presence unnoticed, but her eyes carried a storm of emotions she could not hide. She took a seat in the back row, her hands clasped tightly in her lap as she looked toward the stage. Keanu could feel the energy outside the curtain shift. The crowd was restless, hungry for answers. He closed his eyes for a moment and whispered something to himself, a quiet promise that whatever happened, he would protect Sandra first. Then he stepped through the curtain and walked onto the stage with calm, careful steps. The room fell completely silent. Cameras flashed, microphones pointed forward, and every eye focused on him. The first 5 minutes of his presence alone were enough to increase the tension to its highest point. Even the air felt still. He reached the podium slowly, placing the envelope beside him without drawing attention to it. He looked out at the crowd, his face soft but determined. He began speaking in the same gentle voice the world knew him for, but there was something deeper in his tone, something honest and emotional that made even the reporters lean forward instinctively. He started not with the truth immediately, but with gratitude. He spoke about respect, about humility, about the importance of protecting the people you love. He talked about how fame sometimes created walls, how people often forgot that behind every actor was a heart that longed for understanding and kindness. He spoke about loneliness, about finding strength in unexpected places, and about how certain relationships in his life had shaped him more than any movie ever could. The room listened with complete silence. And then slowly he shifted his words towards Sandra. He spoke about a person who had been his anchor, a person who had stood by him through difficult times, a person whose courage humbled him. He talked about her kindness, her resilience, her ability to bring light even in the darkest moments. The journalists immediately recognized who he was talking about. Cameras zoomed in closer. Whispers spread like lightning. Sandra felt her breath stop in her throat as she watched him from the back of the room, tears gathering in her eyes even before he spoke her name. When Keanu finally said her name, the room erupted with gasps. But he did not flinch. He kept speaking with the same honesty, explaining that for many years he had carried something quietly in his heart, something he believed the world should finally understand. He said that truths built on love should not be hidden forever. He said that protecting someone sometimes meant standing beside them openly instead of silently. He said that he owed the world honesty, but he owed Sandra something much deeper. The tension became unbearable. People leaned forward. The cameras flashed nonstop. And then Keanu did something unexpected. He paused. He placed both hands on the podium and looked directly into the crowd, his voice growing even softer but stronger in emotion. He said he had made a promise long ago, a promise to respect someone he cared for more deeply than any headline could ever explain. He said that their connection had never been about fame, movies, or public stories. It had always been real, private, and deeply human. But just as he was about to reveal the truth, something shocking happened. A loud voice from the front row interrupted him. Someone shouted, asking directly if he and Sandra were secretly married. The entire room erupted into chaos. Reporters yelled questions, cameras shook, voices overlapped, and the calm atmosphere shattered instantly. Sandra felt her heart drop violently, and she stood up from her seat without realizing it. Keanu froze for a moment, shocked by how quickly control slipped away from him. This was not how he wanted to reveal their truth. He wanted dignity, calmness, respect, not chaos. He raised his hand, trying to calm the crowd, but no one listened. Questions shouted from every direction. People demanded confirmation. Some accused him of hiding the truth. Others begged him to explain. The storm he feared had arrived far faster and far harsher than he imagined. Sandra tried to move forward, but security blocked her path. She insisted she needed to reach the stage, but they were moments away from losing control of the situation, and they hesitated. The sound of reporters grew louder, sharper, almost painful. Her fear turned into something deeper, a crushing sense of helplessness. And then, in one sudden moment, Keanu did something that stunned everyone. He picked up the envelope. The entire room froze. The chaos fell silent again, as if the world understood what the envelope meant. His hand trembled slightly, but his eyes were full of clarity. He looked at the crowd and said, in the softest, most vulnerable voice the world had ever heard from him, that inside this envelope was something the world had never seen. Something that would answer every question. But before he could open it, he looked up, and his eyes landed directly on Sandra. Their eyes met across the room. For a moment, everything stopped. No cameras. No noise. No pressure. Only them. And in that split second, Sandra's face broke, her tears forming before she could hide them. The pain, the fear, the love, the confusion, it all showed. And Keanu froze. Because he realized something. Revealing the truth might protect their story. But it might break her heart. He lowered the envelope slowly. The journalist leaned in, confused and desperate. Keanu stepped back from the microphone, breathing deeply. And then he said something no one expected. Something that changed the energy in the room instantly. He said he could not reveal anything until the person he loved most in the world stood beside him willingly. Every reporter turned around instantly. Their eyes landed on Sandra. She stood shocked, trembling, tears falling freely. And the pressure shifted entirely onto her. The room waited for her next move. And she realized in that moment that if she walked toward him, their entire hidden world would become public. If she did not, their bond might crack under the weight of silence. Her feet refused to move. Her heart felt like it was breaking. And Keanu watched her with fear in his eyes. The world held its breath. And just as Sandra finally took one step forward, something happened behind her that made the entire room scream. A sudden crash. Security shouting. An unexpected figure pushing through the back entrance. The moment shattered. And everything spiraled into a new mystery, the moment that pushed everything to the edge. The loud crash echoed through the event hall. It felt as if the air itself shattered. People screamed, chairs scraped against the floor, cameras jerked wildly, and security rushed toward the back entrance where an unexpected figure had forced their way in. The sudden chaos rippled through every corner of the room, turning what was already an emotionally charged moment into something dangerously unpredictable. Sandra froze mid-step, her heart leaping into her throat as she turned sharply toward the noise. Keanu's eyes widened and he instinctively moved forward, as if ready to protect her no matter what the danger was. Security officers surrounded the intruder quickly, but the damage was already done. The sudden interruption created a panic so intense that everything Keanu had been trying to control began slipping through his fingers. Reporters shouted questions again, their voices filled with fear and confusion. Lights flickered, cameras spun. The peaceful atmosphere he wanted had completely vanished, replaced by something raw and chaotic that only grew worse with every passing second. But what truly stunned everyone was when the intruder, even while being restrained on the ground, managed to shout something with all the strength they had left. Their voice was rough, desperate, almost in pain, and the words they screamed sliced through the room with a sharpness no one was prepared for. They shouted that Keanu had no right to reveal anything. They shouted that the world did not deserve to know. And then they shouted Sandra's name, not with anger, but with a kind of broken pleading that sent a cold wave across the room. The entire crowd fell silent instantly. Who was this person? How did they know anything about Keanu and Sandra? What did their desperate warning mean? Even the security officers seemed shaken as they dragged the intruder out of the room, still trying to calm them down. The figure struggled with surprising determination, their voice cracking as they kept yelling that the truth would destroy everything if it came out wrong. Their panic was so genuine that even the reporters stopped shouting for a moment, sensing that something deeper was happening. Sandra felt her knees weak as she looked toward the back entrance, her mind racing with questions she had no answers to. She had never seen that person before. Her breath trembled as she tried to understand why a complete stranger would interfere at this moment, why they seemed so desperate to stop Keanu, and why they screamed her name like they carried her pain inside them. The confusion made her dizzy, and she clutched the back of a chair to steady herself. Keanu moved from the stage, stepping down onto the floor, concern etched across his face. He wanted to reach Sandra to ask if she was all right, to protect her from the storm rising around them. But people were blocking his path, shouting his name, pleading for answers, desperate to know what was happening. He tried to speak, but his voice was drowned out by the chaos. Sandra looked at him from across the room, feeling something inside her break open. She saw the fear in his eyes, the uncertainty, the weight he was carrying alone. She knew he never wanted this moment to unfold like this. He never wanted pain, never wanted chaos, never wanted the world to become a battlefield for their truth. All he wanted was honesty wrapped in dignity, but instead everything had spiraled into a scene neither of them could control. And yet, despite the fear, there was something else rising inside her, a resilience she had always carried but rarely used. She took a slow breath, wiped her tears carefully, and stepped forward again. Her movements were steadier this time, more intentional, fueled by a quiet strength she didn't know she had until now. If the world wanted answers, she would not let Keanu face this alone. Keanu finally managed to push through the crowd and met her halfway. When their eyes met, it felt as if the storm paused for a second. The connection between them, the silent understanding, the unspoken history, it was all there, shining through the panic around them. Sandra looked at him with wet eyes, but also with determination, as if telling him that she was ready to face whatever came next. He reached out a hand toward her very gently, but before their fingers could touch, the event coordinator rushed toward them with panic in his voice. He begged them to step into the private room behind the stage immediately. He warned that the crowd was becoming uncontrollable, that more reporters were storming the doors outside, and that the building was becoming unsafe. He insisted they needed to leave the stage area before anything worse happened. Keanu hesitated, torn between staying in front of the audience and honoring Sandra's emotional readiness. But Sandra touched his arm lightly and whispered that they should go, not to hide, but to breathe and decide together what to do next. The softness in her voice settled something inside him. Without another word, he guided her toward the back room while security blocked the reporters from following. Once the door closed behind them, the noise of the crowd became muffled, but the emotional weight inside the room grew heavier. Sandra sat down, her hands trembling slightly, while Keanu stood across from her, feeling the responsibility of what he almost revealed. The envelope lay between them on a small table, untouched, glowing faintly under the soft overhead light. The silence stretched painfully. Finally, Sandra spoke, her voice quiet but steady. She told him that she understood why he wanted to reveal the truth, that she understood the love behind it, the respect behind it, the courage behind it. She told him she wasn't angry, she wasn't disappointed, she wasn't running away, but she also told him something he wasn't prepared to hear. She wasn't fully ready for the world to know, at least not in this moment of chaos. She said that the way things exploded outside frightened her, not because of the truth itself, but because she feared the world would twist their story into something ugly. Keanu listened closely, his heart aching at her vulnerability. He sat beside her slowly, trying to be as gentle as possible. He apologized softly for bringing her into a storm that was meant to be a moment of respect. He said he wanted everyone to know her strength, her kindness, the way she shaped his life. He said he wanted to honor their marriage, not expose it in a moment filled with fear. And then, surprisingly, Sandra reached for his hand. The warmth of her touch startled him, grounding him in the present. She told him that she trusted him completely, that she knew he would never choose to hurt her. But she also reminded him that sometimes timing mattered as much as truth. She said that revealing their marriage should be a moment of beauty, not confusion. Something that felt like them, calm, honest, real, not a headline born from panic. Keanu nodded slowly, taking in every word. He felt something inside him soften, as if her calm voice washed away all the pressure he had been carrying for months. He realized she was right. He had rushed into this moment because he was tired of hiding, tired of seeing false stories, tired of watching the world guess wrong, but he had forgot to protect the peace of the woman he loved most. They sat quietly for a long moment, hands still intertwined, breaths slowly calming. For the first time since the morning began, they felt like they were back in control of their truth. But that peace was short-lived. A security guard burst into the room, his expression tense. He said that the intruder who caused the chaos earlier had escaped the officers outside. He said they disappeared into the crowd. He said no one knew who they were, but they seemed to know something personal about Keanu and Sandra. And then he said something even more alarming. The intruder left behind a message. The guard placed a small folded note on the table. Keanu and Sandra exchanged a worried look before opening it together. The message inside was written in messy handwriting, rushed and uneven, as if the person wrote it in a moment of panic or desperation. It said, "Do not reveal the truth yet, you are not safe. Someone is watching both of you. Wait for my next message." Sandra felt her blood run cold. Keanu stared at the note, his expression tightening with concern. This was no longer just about the press. No longer just about the world knowing the truth. No longer about fear of public reaction. Someone else was involved. Someone who knew their secret. Someone who was dangerously close. And neither of them understood why. Before they could process the meaning of the message, Sandra's phone buzzed. She looked down slowly. An unknown number had sent her a photo. And when she opened it, her breath stopped completely. The photo showed her and Keanu on their secret wedding day, a moment no one else should have ever seen. Her hands shook violently. Keanu leaned closer, his eyes widening with shock. Someone had been watching them for years. And now they were making their presence known, the secret hidden behind the photo. The room fell into a silence so heavy that even the air seemed unable to move. Sandra stared at the photo on her phone, her fingers trembling so badly she almost dropped it. The image glowed softly on the screen, but its meaning hit like a storm. It was from their secret wedding day, a moment they believed belonged to only the two of them. The small wooden arch, the soft golden light of dusk, the quiet garden behind the mountains far from Los Angeles, the way Keanu held her hands as if they were the most precious thing he had ever touched. Every detail was unmistakable, but the most alarming part was not the memory itself, it was the angle of the photo. It was taken from behind a tree, far enough to stay hidden but close enough to capture everything. Someone had been watching them. Someone had been there. Keanu's breath tightened, and for a long moment he couldn't speak. He gently took the phone from her hands, studying the picture carefully. The shock in his eyes did not come from being exposed to the world. It came from realizing a memory he thought was untouched by outsiders had never been truly private. The idea felt like a violation of something sacred. The wedding day was one of the purest moments of his life, a moment where he and Sandra promised kindness, trust, and protection. Someone turning that into leverage felt deeply painful. Sandra's voice cracked as she whispered that she didn't understand how this was possible. She remembered that day clearly, the gentle breeze, the absolute silence around them, the sense of peace that wrapped their hearts. There were no fans, no reporters, no staff, only the two of them and the officiant they trusted with everything. She recalled hearing nothing unusual, seeing nothing suspicious. It was supposed to be their safe moment, untouched by Hollywood's noise or the world's curiosity. Keanu sat beside her, placing a calming hand on her shoulder, though his own heartbeat was unsteady. He said softly that they must have been followed without knowing, or someone had learned about the location beforehand. Sandra shook her head in disbelief because they told no one, not even their closest friends, not even their families. The officiant himself worked in complete confidentiality. The memory of that day was kept in a place so protected inside their hearts that even speaking of it aloud felt rare. As they both stared at the photo, another message appeared on Sandra's phone. "I warned you, stop before it's too late." The message sent a cold tremor through her chest. Keanu took the phone, his jaw tightening. There was no aggression in his expression, only a growing sense of responsibility and fear for Sandra's safety. He stood up and walked a few steps away, trying to process the situation. The press chaos was one thing, but this, someone threatening them with memories they had kept hidden for years, this was something darker, something more personal. Sandra rose slowly from her seat, her legs weak but her heart filled with determination. She walked toward him, placing a hand on his back. He didn't turn immediately, but she felt him inhale deeply, as if trying to steady himself before facing her fear with his own strength. When he finally turned, the worry in his eyes was unmistakable. She told him that the threats did not scare her as much as the idea that someone had been watching their lives from the shadows, someone who captured their most intimate, sacred moment without their knowledge. She confessed she felt exposed, as if a part of her heart had been taken without permission. She said she didn't care about the world knowing their marriage. What terrified her was the idea that someone dangerous had been close enough to invade that quiet moment. Keanu took her hands in his, holding them firmly. His voice softened as he told her that they would face this together. He said he would not allow anyone to threaten her, not through fear, not through secrets, not through hidden shadows. He told her that their love, their kindness toward each other, and their truth were stronger than whatever game this unknown person was playing. But even as he spoke with confidence, she could hear the concern beneath his words. They both sank back onto the sofa, sitting close, trying to understand who might want to stop them from revealing the truth. Sandra asked quietly if he had any idea who it could be. He shook his head slowly, thinking hard. He said he had no enemies that personal, no one who knew about their marriage or had any reason to be involved in their private life. He said the only people aware of the wedding were the officiant and one longtime employee who helped coordinate the details, someone he trusted without hesitation. But then Sandra's eyes widened. She remembered something, a faint moment she once dismissed as nothing. She remembered seeing someone standing near the trees just after the ceremony ended, but she thought it was only a gardener. She never looked closely, never questioned it, because the moment felt too peaceful to imagine danger. But thinking of it now, the figure had stood too still, too far from the path to look like a worker. She felt her heart race as she told Keanu about it, her voice trembling as the memory resurfaced. Keanu listened carefully, his expression turning serious. He told her that nothing was ever strange during the ceremony from his side, but people often noticed different things when they were emotional or overwhelmed. He asked her if she remembered any details, height, clothes, movement, anything that could help them understand who might have been there. Sandra closed her eyes, trying to focus. She could only recall a shadowy figure, someone slender, someone who seemed to be hiding behind a tree. She remembered the faint movement of leaves as if someone shifted their weight. She remembered thinking it was the wind. She opened her eyes slowly and whispered that maybe it wasn't the wind after all. Before they could speak further, the door burst open again. The event director rushed in, out of breath, telling them that reporters outside were demanding answers, that some were refusing to leave until Keanu returned to the stage. But worse, he said that someone slipped a new note under the door of the main hall. The staff didn't open it, but they believed it was connected to the first message. Keanu and Sandra exchanged a worried glance. The director handed them the sealed note and closed the door behind him, giving them privacy. Keanu opened the note carefully. Inside were 6 words written in the same rushed handwriting. "Do not stand together on stage." Sandra's breath hitched. Keanu's face hardened. The warning was clear, someone did not want them united publicly. Keanu stood up immediately, anger and fear mixing inside him. He refused to let someone cruel dictate their choices. He turned to Sandra, prepared to tell her he would protect her no matter what, but before he spoke, she moved closer and stopped him with a gentle touch. She whispered that they needed to be smart, not emotional. Whoever was sending the messages knew their secret, knew their movements, and was bold enough to infiltrate a major event. Standing together publicly without understanding the danger could put them both at risk. She told him that they needed information before taking any step forward. She reminded him that she trusted him, but trust should walk alongside caution. Keanu exhaled slowly, his anger softening but not disappearing. He knew she was right. He hated it, but he knew it. Just then Sandra's phone buzzed again. This time the message was a video. Her hands shook as she opened it. Keanu leaned close, his breath warm on her shoulder. The video showed a dimly lit room. A figure sat at a table, face hidden in shadow. On the table lay several printed photos. Their wedding photo. Pictures of them meeting secretly over the years. Images from private moments no one should have ever seen. The figure slowly pointed to the photos, then raised a single finger, signaling silence. The video ended abruptly. Sandra felt tears build in her eyes, not from fear alone, but from the shock of how deeply their privacy had been invaded. She whispered that she couldn't understand who hated them enough to do this. Keanu took her into his arms gently, holding her as if shielding her from the entire world. His embrace was steady, warm, protective. He whispered that he would not let anything happen to her, that whoever was behind this would not break them, and that the truth, their truth, was stronger than fear. But as he held her, something else came to his mind, something he never considered before, something that could change everything. He pulled back slightly, looking into Sandra's eyes with deep worry. He told her there was one person from his past, someone he had forgotten about, someone who once crossed a line in ways that unsettled him but never seemed dangerous back then. Someone he never told Sandra about. Her eyes widened, fear shifting into confusion. She asked quietly who it was. Keanu hesitated, swallowed, and finally whispered, "Someone who once told me that if I ever chose love in secret, they would make sure the world paid attention." Sandra froze. Her heart raced. Her breath stopped. She whispered, "Who said that to you, Keanu?" But before he could answer, a loud knock shook the door. Someone outside shouted that the intruder had been spotted again. But this time, they weren't alone. The shadows began to reveal themselves. The pounding on the door was so loud that Sandra instinctively stepped back, her breath tightening as fear spread through her chest like a slow, cold wave. Keanu moved in front of her without hesitation, placing himself between her and the door, his body tense and ready to shield her from anything. The muffled voice outside repeated the warning that the intruder had been spotted again, but this time they were not alone. That single detail was enough to send the room into a suffocating silence. The unknown threat, once a distant shadow, was now becoming something much bigger, something deeply coordinated, something that seemed to be closing in on them from all sides. The security guard's voice sounded urgent, almost panicked, as he explained through the door that two individuals had been seen slipping into the restricted section of the building. They were acting like they belonged there, wearing lanyards and badges that looked official, but their faces were unfamiliar to everyone on staff. The guard added that when security approached them, both individuals disappeared into the crowd with unsettling precision, as if they knew every blind spot and escape route in the building. This wasn't random, this wasn't accidental. Whoever they were, they had planned every step. Keanu's eyes shifted towards Sandra, silently checking if she was all right. She gave a small nod, though her hands were trembling so much she had to hide them behind her back. She felt overwhelmed, frightened, and confused, but she also felt a strange strength rising inside her. She refused to break. She refused to let fear swallow her. She whispered to Keanu that they needed to understand who these people were before making any move, because revealing their marriage now, under these circumstances, could turn their truth into someone else's weapon. Keanu took a deep breath, steadying himself, and told the guard to secure the hallway while they discussed what to do next. Once the footsteps faded away, he turned back to Sandra with emotion in his eyes, the weight of years pressing against him. He sat down slowly, gesturing for her to sit beside him. She joined him, their knees touching gently, and waited quietly for him to speak. Keanu told her that the person he had mentioned earlier, the one who once warned him about choosing love in secret, was someone he met years before they got married. Someone who was obsessed not with him, but with the idea of controlling the narrative around him. A former industry consultant who believed that celebrities owed their private lives to the public. Keanu had disagreed deeply with them, and after several uncomfortable encounters, he cut contact entirely. At the time, he believed the situation was over, but now, with everything happening, he feared that this person, or someone influenced by them, might be involved. Sandra listened carefully, her heart beating hard with every detail he revealed. She had never seen Keanu speak with such emotional conflict before. He looked haunted by the thought that someone from his past might be manipulating their lives from the shadows, using the most sacred moment they shared as leverage. She placed her hand gently on his, grounding him, letting him know she was there, that he wasn't facing this alone. Keanu explained that years ago, during a private conversation at an industry event, this person had told him something unsettling, that love hidden was love controlled, and that the public deserved to know every detail of the people they admired. Keanu had disagreed with quiet firmness, saying that respect and privacy mattered more. The consultant grew frustrated and accused him of being naive, claiming that secrets only created opportunities for others to twist the truth. When Keanu refused to continue the discussion, the consultant said something that stayed with him: "If you ever choose love in silence, someone else will make noise for you." He never took it seriously. Now he wondered if that warning had been a threat disguised as philosophy. Sandra felt her throat tight. She whispered that someone capable of saying such things might be capable of far more. She felt anger slowly mixing with her fear, not anger at Keanu, but at whoever was trying to manipulate their lives, their love, their truth. She felt protective of him in a way she never expected, wanting to shield him from guilt he didn't deserve. She told him gently that none of this was his fault, that no one had the right to punish them for loving each other quietly. Before Keanu could respond, a soft buzzing sound interrupted them. It came from Sandra's phone again. She hesitated, her fingers trembling as she picked it up. Keanu leaned closer, eyes fixed on the screen. A new message appeared. "You are not listening." And then another. "If you step outside together, everything will fall apart." Attached to the message was a second photo. Sandra opened it slowly, her breath shakier than before. The photo showed the two suspicious individuals from moments ago, standing in a hallway near the exit. One of them was holding a camera with a long lens. The other was holding a small device that looked like an audio recorder. But what felt most terrifying was the caption written across the image. "We've been collecting your truth for years." Sandra felt her entire body go cold. Keanu closed his eyes for a moment, fighting the rising anger in him. He whispered that this had gone far beyond invasion of privacy. Someone was building a story about them, a story they planned to release on their own terms at their own moment. Someone wanted to control the narrative of their marriage, to use it not for love, but for exposure, power, or manipulation. Keanu stood up suddenly, pacing the room with tension in his shoulders. He said they couldn't just sit here and wait for the next threat. They needed answers. They needed to figure out who these people were and what they wanted. Sandra rose too, moving toward him, placing her hands gently on his arms. She told him that rushing into danger without understanding it could make things worse. She reminded him that whoever was behind this was watching them, predicting their moves, using fear to push them into making mistakes. Keanu's breathing slowed as her words settled into him. He looked at her with deep emotion, realizing she was right again. Sandra had always been the steady one, the voice of balance, the person who saw through chaos with clarity. Her resilience anchored him in the moment. Just then, the director re-entered the room quietly, explaining that the building had gone into partial lockdown. The press refused to leave. Fans were gathering outside. More reporters had arrived. Social media was exploding with speculation. Whatever Keanu planned to say earlier had already created waves even without being spoken. The director warned them that if they stayed inside too long, the crowd outside could become uncontrollable. Sandra looked at Keanu with a mix of strength and sadness. She whispered that no matter what they chose next, the world would demand answers. The only question was how much of their truth they were willing to give away and when. Keanu walked toward the table and picked up the envelope again. The weight of it felt different now, heavier, filled not only with truth but with tension, threats, and the shadows surrounding them. He looked at Sandra, his voice gentle but steady. He told her that the most important thing to him was her safety. He said he did not care if the world knew about their marriage today or in 100 years, as long as she felt safe and respected. Sandra felt tears forming again, but these tears weren't from fear. They were from the overwhelming tenderness in his words. She whispered that his protection meant more to her than anything, but hiding forever was not an option either. They deserved honesty. They deserved peace. They deserved the chance to tell their story without being hunted by unseen threats. Keanu moved closer, taking her hands again, and whispered that love was supposed to bring strength, not fear. He promised he would find out who was behind all of this, and he promised he would put an end to it before it destroyed their chance to speak their truth. Sandra leaned her forehead against his, closing her eyes as their breathing synchronized, two hearts trying to stay steady in the middle of a storm. But the storm wasn't done with them yet. The security guard ran back into the room, pale and shaken. He said the intruder from earlier had been caught on camera entering the underground parking area. But worse, the two suspicious individuals were already there waiting for him. And all three of them disappeared together into the shadows. Keanu felt his stomach drop. Because whoever those people were, they weren't working alone. They were part of something larger. Something organized. Something dangerous. And then the guard added one more detail, the detail that chilled both Keanu and Sandra to their core. The intruder left behind another message before disappearing. A final warning. You have one more chance to stop. If you speak today, we release everything tonight. Keanu's hands tightened into fists. Sandra felt her breath collapse. Because the word everything hinted at a truth neither of them had considered yet. There might be more than wedding photos. More than hidden videos. More than threats. There might be pieces of their private life they didn't even know had been stolen. And if those were released, the world would never see them the same again. The truth that rose above the fear. The room grew colder as the guard's final warning echoed through the air. Sandra felt the weight of those words settle into her bones, a heaviness that made her chest tight in ways she had never felt before. Keanu stood completely still, his jaw tense, his hands curled into fists as if he were fighting a storm inside himself. The threat was clear. They dared to speak today. Everything, every stolen moment, every secret, every piece of their private love would be thrown into the world without mercy. Someone had been watching them, tracking them, possibly for years. Someone wanted control. Someone wanted power. Someone wanted to destroy the quiet world they had built together. But in that moment of fear, something else rose between them, something stronger. Sandra reached out and took Keanu's hand firmly. Her touch was warm, grounding, steady. He turned toward her slowly, and she saw in his eyes not fear, not confusion, but a deep sorrow mixed with fierce protectiveness. She whispered softly that she couldn't keep living under someone else's shadow. She couldn't let fear dictate their love. She couldn't let hidden threats decide the value of their truth. She told him that whoever was behind this chaos wanted them to remain silent, but silence was no longer safety. Silence had become a weapon used against them. Keanu felt her words settle into him like light breaking through darkness. He realized she wasn't trembling anymore. She wasn't backing away. She wasn't letting fear swallow her. She was stronger now, standing tall in the middle of the storm, and her courage gave him strength he didn't know he still had. He lifted her hand gently, pressing it against his chest, letting her feel the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. He whispered that whatever happened next, he would face it beside her. He would not leave her alone for 1 second. He would protect her, not through secrecy, but through honesty, unity, and truth. Sandra nodded slowly, tears forming again, but these tears weren't from helplessness. They were from the courage rising inside her, a courage she never realized she had until this moment. She whispered that she was ready to tell the world the truth, ready to face whatever consequences came, ready to step out of the shadows with him. She said love deserved honesty, not fear, and she said she trusted him more than anyone in her life. Keanu held her face gently in his hands, eyes soft and full of emotion, whispering that her strength humbled him. He told her that today would not be the day fear won. And so, hand in hand, they stepped out of the private room. The hallway outside was filled with tension. Security tightened their formation, guiding them toward a secure passage that led back to the stage. Reporters had grown louder and more impatient. The building shook with the energy of people demanding answers. But as Sandra and Keanu walked through the corridor, a strange calm settled around them, the calm that comes when two people choose courage over fear. Sandra squeezed his hand, and he squeezed back gently. When they reached the stage entrance, the director rushed to them, panic in his eyes. He begged them not to go on stage. He warned them that the crowd was unstable, that the threats were real, that exposing themselves now could create irreversible chaos. But Keanu shook his head quietly, saying that truth was not chaos, fear was chaos, and he refused to let fear guide their lives any longer. The director looked at Sandra, hoping she might hesitate, but she gave him a small, determined nod. Her voice was soft but unshakably firm as she said that the truth deserved air. The director stepped aside slowly, defeated but deeply moved. And then, with a final deep breath, Keanu and Sandra walked onto the stage together. The moment they appeared side by side, the entire room erupted into gasps. Cameras flashed instantly. Reporters surged forward. Whispers rippled across the audience like a wave. The world had been watching, waiting, craving answers, and now they saw something no one had ever seen before. Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock standing together, fingers intertwined, eyes steady, united in a way that left no room for doubt. Their connection was undeniable. Keanu stepped toward the microphone first, his voice steady and unusually brave. He didn't open the envelope. He didn't hold up any proof. He simply spoke with honesty, letting the weight of his words guide the room into silence. He told the world that love was not meant to be hidden forever, but sometimes it needed space to grow, to breathe, to learn, to protect itself. He said that he had chosen silence for years, not out of shame, but out of respect, respect for the woman beside him, respect for their peace, respect for the beauty of something real. He spoke about trust, vulnerability, pain, resilience, and the quiet strength they had shared without needing applause or attention. He said the world often forgot that celebrities were people first, people who loved, feared, hoped, and protected the things closest to their hearts. The room grew still. Every camera stopped moving. Every reporter stopped speaking. And then Keanu did something that broke the world's silence completely. He looked at Sandra. Not at the crowd, not at the microphones, but at her. He took a deep breath and said in a voice soft enough to shake her soul that years ago they made a promise of respect, a promise of loyalty, a promise of love, a promise spoken far from Hollywood, far from cameras, far from noise, a promise that joined their lives in a way only the two of them understood. And then he said it. That Sandra Bullock was not just someone he admired, not just someone he cared for, but someone he had married in a quiet ceremony filled with honesty and tenderness. He said she was the person who brought peace to his world, the person who taught him resilience and kindness in ways no one else could. He said she was the part of his life he was most grateful for. Gasps echoed everywhere. The world seemed to stop breathing. Sandra felt tears spill down her cheeks, not from fear, but from an overwhelming wave of relief, love, and courage. She stepped closer, placing her hand on his arm, grounding him, letting him know she was with him. Then it was her turn. She stepped to the microphone, her voice trembling at first, but quickly gaining strength. She told the world that hiding wasn't easy, that the quietness of their love wasn't meant to deceive anyone, it was meant to protect something delicate and real. She said that love didn't always need spotlight or noise. Sometimes it grew best in silence, in patience, in small moments that didn't belong to the world. But she also said that today wasn't about hiding anymore. Today was about standing beside the man who had shown her what kindness truly meant. She told the world she was proud to call him her partner, proud to call him her husband, proud of the life they had built quietly and respectfully. And then, with one final breath, she said something that left the world in tears. "We didn't hide our love because we were afraid of the world. We hid it because we were afraid the world would not understand the softness of it." The room fell silent in awe. But just then, as cameras flashed wildly, something unexpected happened. One of the suspicious individuals from earlier emerged from the side of the room, stepping forward as if to interrupt. Security rushed toward them immediately, but before they could reach the person, the intruder raised both hands in surrender. The entire room held its breath. The intruder announced in a shaken voice that they were done fighting, that they never wanted to hurt Keanu or Sandra. They revealed that the person behind the threats was the same consultant Keanu had mentioned, someone obsessed with controlling narratives, someone who believed privacy was a weakness. The intruder claimed they were manipulated, pressured, and told lies about what revealing the truth would do to the industry. But after witnessing Keanu and Sandra's honesty, they felt guilt overpower everything. The intruder handed over a small flash drive to security, saying it contained every stolen photo, video, and document. Nothing had been shared yet. They said no harm had been done. They said it wasn't too late to stop the damage. Keanu and Sandra stood frozen. The danger dissolved. The room exhaled. And finally, peace began to return. With trembling hands, Keanu reached for Sandra's. She squeezed his fingers, tears still falling, but now with relief, not fear. Slowly, the audience's shock softened into applause. Not loud applause, not chaotic applause, but a gentle, emotional, respectful applause, the kind that came from hearts touched by truth. Keanu turned to Sandra, wiping a tear from her cheek with tender care. She leaned into him, whispering that they did the right thing. He whispered back that her courage made it possible. Together, they stepped away from the microphones, hand in hand, no longer hiding, no longer afraid. Their love, once quiet, now stood in the open, not as a scandal, not as a spectacle, but as a story of resilience, trust, humility, and kindness. A story that would inspire millions. A story that finally belonged to them. And as they walked off stage toward a new beginning, Sandra broke down into tears again, not of sorrow, but of overwhelming freedom. Keanu wrapped his arms around her gently and whispered the words he had carried for years. "We are safe now, we are finally free." Their story, once hidden, now shone brighter than any spotlight. And for the first time in years, they both felt the same thing. Peace.